Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Sports Wrap. My name is Scott Morganoff, Motor City Mad Mouth. Glad to have you with us tonight. We have a special guest, George Eichhorn. He'll be on periodically when we need him, and we're glad to have him on for this particular show. The episode's called The Trade That Changed the New York Rangers Forever, but meanwhile, we're going to talk a little Red Wings hockey, and let's talk about the crew we have. We have myself, George Eichhorn, Mike Santos, and Cody Spink, and Katie Ebling is behind the scenes doing whatever research is necessary. All right, let's get this party started. Obviously, down in South Florida, I'll be monitoring the Miami Hurricanes and Ole Miss Rebels out in Arizona as well. See how the Canes are doing. Let's get this bad boy started. Former Red Wings coach Jacques Demers wanted Rob Probert to quit smoking. George, obviously Proby was a guy that you had to watch over, but I know there was deep passion for those guys.
Yeah, Jacques had his hands full with Proby and, a bunch of the guys that like to, let's just say, have a good time, as we all know. And unfortunately, Bob is gone from us right now, and that's not good. But looking at that situation, it was very, very a sad era, like for Detroit. And I'm talking about, the drinking they had in Edmonton that time. And then, like you mentioned with this story about smoking. And of course, you could speak for this too, Mike. I mean, athletes in general are encouraged not to do something that's harmful to your body. And then, I mean, if Probert was out there smoking, and I don't know what he was all smoking, he could have done different things, but maybe let's just say cigars or cigarettes. It doesn't help you in your performance. You can enjoy it after a victory, maybe for a little bit, but I don't think that Probert was doing the right thing, because it was probably hurting him, and then eventually leading to other things which we know happened with him in his life.
So, Mike, what are your thoughts about a coach obviously tell the player, please don't smoke? Obviously, it's more of a protective situation.
Well, actually, I have a lot to say about this topic, which is probably not unusual, right?
Right.
First of all, I don't want to speak for other sports, but I know being around hockey, particularly in the mid 80s and earlier, there were a lot of players that smoked in the dressing room and smoked between periods. Guy Lafleur was famous for having a smoke between periods. Al Iafrate, who people in the Detroit area know very well, another guy that you could see out in the hallway between periods on a folding chair having a smoke. I remember hearing a story when I worked for the Islanders from Anders Kaller, who played on those 4 in a row Stanley Cup teams. And he said when he first came over from Sweden, one of the first games he came in after the first period, he took his helmet off, his gloves off, took his sweater over his head, and then he looked around. There was nobody in the dressing room because they were all in the trainer's room having a smoke. So it was a very common thing. I think, of course, even before that in the 70s, smoking was a big part of culture, right? In this country, but especially in Canada. And I think it was part of the culture in Canada and even in Europe longer than it was in the US. So a lot of these guys just grew up with that being part of what they did. The second thing I'll say about that is it probably was something that Probert used so he didn't do other things that were more harmful, whether that was drinking or drugs. So maybe that was the least vice, I guess, that he was involved in. But then the third thing I'll say about this is I certainly understand Jacques Demers wanting him not to smoke, probably more for his own good than anything else. And I think George is right. It definitely, and we know now, and athletes know now that it does, hurt your performance. And the one thing I'd like to say about Jacques Demers is he was a fantastic coach. And he really was the coach that turned the Red Wings around. He wasn't there when they finally got over the hump and started winning Stanley Cups, but he had them almost there. He had them in a couple of conference finals where they lost out to Edmonton, which was a juggernaut then in Gretzky's prime. He was the guy that, in my opinion, really got them going in the right direction. And I was glad to see him finally win a Stanley Cup when he coached Montreal in '93. So good for Jacques Demers.
He actually had a restaurant in Metro Detroit in
Yeah.
Southfield, didn't he, George?
Really?
I think I was in there more than once. Did you ever go to that, Mike? I don't know if you ever made it there. But
no, I never was there.
No.
But another thing about Jacques, too, which was not known until the later 90s when he was coaching Tampa, he never knew how to read. He never knew how to read.
Oh, that I didn't hear. Wow.
That's pretty interesting when you're coaching an NHL team.
How do you read the lineup then?
Yeah, he used to have other people do it for him, Cody. And nobody ever knew.
Yeah, I actually heard that story, Mike. Yeah, he didn't know how to read, but boy, he was a heck of a coach. Cody, what are your thoughts on this? Bob Probert and Jacques Demers.
Well, I would not want to be the person to tell Bob Probert to stop smoking. I think that was well before my time, I want to say, before I really started getting into hockey. But I've heard plenty of stories from podcasts, and I actually listened to Stu Grimson's book, and he talked about Bob Probert a lot in that one. So, and especially to get someone to stop smoking, like they can already be on edge when they're trying to do that, and that would be the last person I want to see on edge, and without his nicotine or anything like that. So I mean, but I agree with what Mike was saying. It's probably the smoking was probably better than him doing alcohol or drugs or beating the crap out of more people.
Right.
Yeah, him and Joey Koser, they definitely made a bad boys team of their own for sure. So also, we'll get to the Detroit topics. I know George is kind enough to spend a little bit of his time with us tonight. But the Red Wings have sent down forward Nate Danielson after 28 games with the Wings, where he only had 7 points. What went wrong with Nate out in Detroit, George?
Well, I think right now, he's in a situation that's a difficult one. He's trying to, play his way into the lineup, let's say. He's on like one of those fringe players, fourth line kind of thing. And I guess Todd didn't see enough progress, and Stevie Y probably either. So they sent him back to Grand Rapids. And he was drafted 9th by Detroit in 2023. The entry draft, and they signed him to a 3-year entry-level contract. But he's really yet to prove himself. He's played with Grand Rapids for a couple seasons, and now, like you mentioned, Scott, he got his chance in Detroit early on here. It's just not clicking for him. I'm not one to write off a kid.
Oh, and mid-speech.
Oh, well, here he comes, and there he goes. Mike, why don't you pick up until he gets back?
I think what George was saying.
I think he's back. All right, George, continue.
I was going to say that, Danielson, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what the hell happened, but he's 6'2", 187. I think that's a pretty good height and weight, don't you guys? Forward.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, this is one of those deals where, and this was one of Stevie Y's draft choices, of course, but this is a situation where, does the guy need more time? Does he need more time in the minors? Well, I guess so in their eyes, but I'm not going to give up on him yet,
Okay. Mike, what are your thoughts about Nate Danielson? Obviously, young player. There's an upside, but got a taste of the NHL and got a taste of humility too.
Well, things have changed this year in Detroit. There's there was a little bit of pressure even on Steve Yzerman this year after not making
Right.
the playoffs last couple of years. I mean, it's now been a 6 or 7 year project.
Yeah, 7.
Yeah, and so 7th overall pick or not, you got to perform, and the team is performing. To this point, they've had a pretty decent year, and it's not about trying to get this guy out of his slump or get this guy fit him in so we can help him get better and develop. Right now, it's about we need to get to the playoffs this year, and if he's not helping us pull on the rope, then we're just going to have to go get somebody else, and we'll worry about him later. I think it's just that simple. I think in other years, maybe this is the type of stuff Detroit would have stuck with him and did what they needed to do. Maybe played him with some players that he didn't even deserve to play with to try to get him going. They can't do that this year. That team's got to make the playoffs, and particularly the position they're in here halfway through this year, they can't afford to slump at any time. And when you look across the league, it's so competitive, playoff spots, that a bad week and you'll find yourself out of it. So I think it's that simple. It really is with them this year. I will say though that he's going down to play for a heck of a Grand Rapids team. I mean, they may set the all-time record for points for any league. I mean, I think they've only lost 2 in regulation this year.
I think that 2 or 3.
Yeah, I mean they're I don't know the record offhand, but I'm gonna say they're somewhere around like 32-2, 1-1, or 2-2, or something like that. But they've only been beaten in regulation, I think, twice in about 40 games.
29, 1-1.
There you go.
Wow.
I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
He had Sebastian Coates was on that team too, and I hear he's doing pretty well. So, depending on what happens with their goaltending situation in the NHL, at some point you want to think Sebastian Coates was going to get up at some point. But yeah, obviously Todd McClellan's feeling it, and Nate Danielson wasn't getting it done. We'll see if he comes back for sure. What are your thoughts, Cody, on this?
I mean, it's never a bad thing to send a young player back to the AHL to get some polishing, is I would say the right term. Especially, it's probably easier to send him down than try to waive, a player that that you could lose that's valuable, because at least he's able to go up and down the AHL without clearing through waivers. So I think that's probably the best thing. And like I said, a little more AHL experience won't really hurt that many young players like him. I mean, I know like the Yzer plan, they like to, make sure everyone's polished in the AHL. Like I'm even surprised that that one kid got called up so quick for Detroit, because normally they like to keep all their players in the AHL a lot longer than normal. So, but I mean, like I said, nothing wrong with a young kid like that going back to the AHL, especially like what Mike was saying, this juggernaut of a team in the AHL right now. So, I mean, that wouldn't hurt him either.
All right, on to our third Red Wing topic, forgettable. Ken Holland's final draft with Detroit was exactly that. So let me go over the players. Philip Zadina was drafted by Holland. He had 181 games played, 27 goals, 38 assists. Joe Veleno, 288 games played, 35 goals, 39 assists. Jonathan Berggren, I guess he was recently traded, round 2, 33rd overall, 169 games played, 31 goals, 33 assists. Jared McKissick, round 2, 36th overall, never played. How about that? Okay, never played. Alec Regula, round 3, 67th overall, 41 games played, 1 goal, 1 assist. That's not keeping you in the big leagues too long. Seth Barton, round 3, 81st overall, never played. Jesper Eliasson, round 3, 84th overall, never played. Ryan O'Reilly, round 4, 98th overall, never played. Victor Bratstrom, round 6, 160th overall, never played. Otto Kivinmaki, round 7, 191st overall, never played. And there you have it. Okay, George, that wasn't the last good act for Ken Holland.
Well, just to set the record straight, Bergeron was picked up on waivers. I don't think Eiserman thought he was going to lose him, but the St. Louis Blues snatched him up. Now he was their team rookie of the year, his first full year in Detroit. He played some good hockey, but he's another one that's not been performing for the last this season and even back to a lot of part of last season. But I think you come on a common thread here, Scott, and that's the fact that despite all the success of our friend Kenny Holland, and I'm never going to take away those Stanley Cup championships. I'd be stupid. Any of us would be dumb to say he didn't do anything in Detroit. The problem was the drafting, and the drafting, obviously, Detroit being with lower positions because of their success story. We know about that, so their draft choices were low, or in some cases, he made a few trades and dealt them away. But these guys here, you mentioned, Zadina and then Velino, and he was with the Blackhawks at the end of last year. He played some international hockey. And Berggren, those were the only three that actually did much of anything, and it wasn't really successful, at least for Zadina. He's not done yet, but we'll see what happens. But I think I saw one article that said if you looked at the total draft of this draft that you mentioned, Scott, that year, 2018, I mean, the Red Wings would be hitting like 220 if you're putting it into a batting average. I mean, or less than that even. So, I mean, again, scouting. And I know you can speak about this, Mike, but you got scouts all over the world. And when they built that Red Wing juggernaut, they had great scouts in Europe, and they got the right talent. But it seems like, at least in Holland's latter years as Detroit's GM, it just wasn't clicking. They didn't land the players they needed.
Okay, fair enough. Cody, he's your problem now.
Verbeek's my problem, not Ken Holland. That's my dad's problem.
Okay.
But yeah, I know a lot of people did not like the Corey Perry move, but I mean that's probably been the best move he's made so far as the Kings GM. But like I said, I remember those years with him in Detroit because I said that was I want to say when I really started getting more and more into hockey, and I know the Red Wings were just a wagon around that time. But like I said, I know that is a pretty forgettable draft. So I think they even Philip Zadina they terminated. They did like a mutual contract termination, I believe. But yeah, like I said, Ken Holland, we've only really seen him for one draft for the Kings so far, and I haven't heard many complaints about that. It was just the free agent moves that he's made so far. I don't agree with, and as a Ducks fan with him, I think it's a good thing that he gave Cody Ceci 4 years by $4.5 million a year. I wouldn't have done it though. But like I said, I mean, he's a great GM. He's won the Stanley Cups. You can't be a horrible GM and win Stanley Cups. So he has to be good at something with that. So I have no complaints with him so far. But as Kings fans, I know they're like 50-50 on him so far.
Mike?
I mean, I think George made a number of really good points. First of all, I don't think anyone would trade the Stanley Cup years for, the drafting that the organization did the last few years. And George also makes another good point. When you're having the success they had, you're not drafting in the top 5 or even 10 or even 15 of a draft. I mean, a number of those picks that you cited, Scott, were like in the 3rd round and at the end of the 3rd round. So I think that's another thing. And the third point I would echo that George made is everybody wants to pin things like the draft on the general manager, but it's not really the general manager. It's your team, especially your scouts, that are the guys that are out there, watching these guys. I mean, your GM might, upon request, go out and watch a prospect or two just so he has an idea what that player is like when it comes down to deciding who to pick. But you're really relying on your team of scouts.
Right.
And so I don't really look at a draft, good or bad, as being a reflection of the GM, other than maybe the GM needs to change his scouting staff up or give some of them some bonuses. I mean, that's the way I look at drafting. And where the Red Wings really made hay in the 80s and into the 90s drafting, especially the early 90s, was by going after the players overseas.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
like I saw Pavel Datsyuk live at the Baltic Cup in Russia, and I didn't even know who he was, and I was like, this kid's unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, I mean, he stood out. And you go, anybody that's been over to Russia to watch games, like, you don't get a lineup sheet because all the names are in Cyrillic and numbers, so you can't read it. And there was this number 13 just going crazy, and he was a magician with the puck, and he was so strong on his skates, and he was winning every puck battle. And I got back to my hotel room in Moscow, and I started doing a little looking, and sure enough, the Red Wings had already taken him, like before everybody even knew about him. So, you start to look at the Lindstroms. I mean, obviously, who was a star like Datsyuk, but what about the Thomas Holmstroms, the Michael Samuelsons, like those type of guys. I mean, like those guys, the Sergei Fedorovs. Like they were just elite, and they were ahead of their time at getting players, that weren't from North America.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, that's an excellent point. It really is. They're taking it. When you think about they brought in all those Russian players there for many years. Once upon a time, they were looking at Vladislav Tretiak, even though he never became available. They had the right idea going there, but the way Holland leads with that draft, you would have thought one of those players. All you were hoping for was one would have been any good. And Philip Zdina kept saying before he was drafted, I'm going to put pucks in the net. Boy, if that wasn't a big sales job, then I don't know what kind of a sales job is. And it got him a one-way ticket out. He couldn't even go ahead he couldn't even carry a paper bag and put him in there that way.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was in Nashville, and all of a sudden one season I'm looking, and they're in our division, and I'm like, where did Hoodler come from?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, this guy's he's like this small little guy, tough as nails. He's always around the net, and he's just banging pucks in like, they're going out of style. And I'm like, why didn't our scouts find this guy?
Yeah.
They found those guys, man.
I wanted to add one other thing, Scott, if I may. And this is something that a friend of mine did some research on. He found out that there's only 4 Red Wings. Now, this was going back even another year or two, but Valino, Berggren, Michael Rasmussen in 2017, and Dylan Larkin in 2014 are the only 4 players drafted by the Red Wings from 2014 to 2018 that are still on a roster.
Wow.
And so it's this whole thing about, and I know, we don't want to just dump on Ken Holland, like you said, Mike, but their batting average is particularly bad. They said that the league roughly has a 45% success rate defined by a draftee playing at minimal 1 game in the NHL. The Red Wings were well below that average. And I think that it's an indictment. This is Kevin Allen speaking, as we all respect Kevin Allen. I know, Scott, you know him, and Mike and Cody. Kevin Allen, a longtime USA Today hockey writer. He did the research on that. So hats off to you, Kevin. It's not good news for Red Wing fans, but it shines a little bit more about what we're talking about.
Okay, George, you know what? I have 2 original 6 topics. I know you're as original 6 as any. Do you mind staying on for at least those 2? And then
Sure. Let's do those. Yeah.
Then we'll talk about Glenn Hall. And I know you want to get going. I want to be true to my word that you are borrowed time, but these are just too good to pass up. the Canadiens, obviously, Montreal Canadiens with the most points in history. They have 3 players with 1,000 points plus. I'm going to go over the list. Guy Lafleur with 1,246, Jean Beliveau with 1,219, Henri Richard 1,046, Maurice Richard 966, Larry Robinson 883, Yvon Cornwallier 863, probably out most of these before Cody's time anyway. Jacques Lemaire at 835, Steve Shutt 776. We have Bernie Jeffrey on at 759. I think Saku Koivu was 641. But George, when
I
you
know
look
that
at
one.
oh, you
I
did.
know that
Okay.
one.
All right, well, you know that one, but that's okay. George, what are your thoughts about this impressive list by the Canadians?
Oh, that is very impressive. I mean, you're talking about guys that are Hall of Famers. The thing is, and I think that Scott and I were a little spoiled when we were growing up, but we had the advantage of getting a Canadian station. CBC did Hockey Night in Canada, so we would either see Toronto or Montreal every Saturday night. That was the first game usually, unless they were playing out west. And we got a chance to see some of these guys, or if you went to the arena, obviously see them against the Red Wings. But Yvon Cornwallier and Guy Lafleur, and just these guys were just fantastic. I mean, they were so good. Montreal with those dynasty teams. Scotty Bowman was the coach, and I mean for a long time. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, people are jealous in a way. Fans are jealous, God, we can't win like Montreal did. But Montreal had a successful formula. Okay, they had a great coach, they had good management, and they knew how to mold a winning championship team, Stanley Cup winners. And I mean, I can't even single out that list you had because all those guys were good. They were great players. Really
Mike,
good.
Mike, pretty interesting list, isn't it?
Yeah. A couple things about Montreal. One is, for those who don't know, back in the day, the NHL used to divide up parts of Canada and the U.S., but more importantly, Canada by territories. So basically, any kid from Quebec that was worth his weight was automatically going to play for the Montreal Canadiens. When they then changed and there became drafting, it was still a territorial draft. And so Montreal still had the kids from Quebec especially. And so, for years and years, they ended up turning out the most talented players. And so they just naturally became Canadians. The last part of that is into the 80s, the draft didn't end until all the teams stopped picking.
Oh.
And so you would have, there was at one time 6 teams, and of course then it went up to 12 and then 14. There were drafts where the other teams in the league would say, okay, we've got everybody we wanted. And Montreal, would just say okay, we'll take that guy and we'll take that guy and we'll take that guy. Like Chris Nyland, for instance, I believe was drafted in the 32nd round.
Jesus.
And you won't find any other players drafted in the 32nd round because all the other teams in the league stopped drafting at around the 8th or 9th round.
Oh.
So they just kept taking players, and and a lot of these guys that they would take when everybody else had said we don't want them, we're done. Some of them would turn out to be pretty good players. So I think that really was first of all a good strategy by the Canadians, but secondly the reasons why they got so many of those players, and then especially in the 50s, part of the 60s, and then again in the 70s, that Montreal Canadiens team was just far and away better than every other team in the league.
Yeah, I think they were.
Yeah. It started with the 5 cups in a row in the 50s.
Yeah.
They went and they got 4 in a row in the 70s. They were just, there was the one team in the 70s, I don't remember what year, I think they lost 8 games the whole season. You know,
Oh, jeez.
like they were just far and away so much better than everybody.
I mean, George said a mouthful when you start bringing up hockey night in Canada. Really? Seriously? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, we're here. We are on the Windsor border, and we're getting this, and
Yeah.
we get to see the guys every single Saturday. Great stuff, Mike. Some thoughts, Cody, about 9 guys you probably haven't heard of. One you did.
Yeah. Like I said, the only one I know was the Saku Koivu because I believe was he the one that played for the Ducks at one point? I know there was 2 of them. There was Saku and what was the other brother's name? I want to say Saku's the one that did
Miko.
play for the Ducks at one point. Miko Koivu.
Miko, yeah.
I can't remember which one played for the Ducks. I can't remember. I just remember
Miko.
that one of them. One of them played.
Saku played for Montreal and then Minnesota at his end of his career.
Okay, so then it was Miko Koivu that played for the Ducks. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember one of them playing for the Ducks and stuff like that. I believe he was a center as well. Like I said, most of those players way before me. But like I said, what a great class for all those Montreal Canadian.
Don't worry,
You know,
Cody.
draft-
There will be topics like this. We know that. No problem.
Yeah, I'm
That's why
lost.
you have us. That's why you have us old guys. George, this is just a
Yeah.
question for you, and then I'm gonna
Sure.
hit you with one more original 6, and then we'll get you out of here with
Yeah.
the Glenn Hall. Okay, and that's this. I mean, I guess we can all talk. The Canadian Thanksgiving had some pretty interesting matchups. We'll talk about it with everybody. They featured Detroit and Toronto and St. Louis versus Vancouver. How do you like those matchups, George? Obviously, Detroit and Toronto on the Canadian Thanksgiving, and then St. Louis and Vancouver.
I think it's a great idea, Scott. I know that they've been trying to do more and more on that Canadian Thanksgiving. For our American listeners, that's usually the same day, Columbus Day, or
Right.
Native American, whatever we want to call that day. But yeah, I mean, anytime you can match up original 6 like that, Detroit, Toronto, I'm all for it. I mean, I know it's on a Monday, obviously, when they have their Thanksgiving, unlike ours, but I think it's a great idea. I think they should do more of that. I mean, get Montreal and the Rangers together, get, even Pittsburgh. I know they're not original 6, but they were in the next 6. But I think it's a super idea. They play football, Canadian League game, maybe one or two that day. Why not play some hockey that day?
Mike, what are your thoughts about those 2 matchups?
Yeah, I mean, for U.S. Thanksgiving, we think of it as a football day.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you think of Canadian Thanksgiving as a hockey day? I think
Exactly.
I think George is right on the money.
Yeah, Cody.
So,
No, I 100% agree. Like what Mike was saying, like we have American football for our Thanksgiving, why not have ice hockey on Canadian Thanksgiving? That just makes the most sense. So I completely agree with that.
Okay, well, let's talk about our featured topic of the night. And that's this, a trade that changed the New York Rangers forever. What was that trade? Let me go over it with you. On October 4th, 1991, the Edmonton Oilers traded their captain, Mark Messier, who had been with the team for all 5 of their Stanley Cup championships, to the New York Rangers. To return, the Oilers received forwards Louis DeBrusque, Bernie Nichols, and Stephen Rice. I don't know what you remember of it, Cody. All I know is it broke a big, big drought in the Big Apple.
Like I said, this is probably before my time as well. But all I know is him going to the Rangers really did change that franchise. I mean, obviously they got the Stanley Cup in '94 there. So I won't say how old I was. Let's just say it was single digits early. So like I said, I just know there was just a great time in New York during that time when Messier got there.
All right, well, and then before George Eichhorn time, is it?
yeah. No, it sure isn't, and I have to agree with you, Scott. That was a great trade. I mean, that grabbed headlines in Canada, the U.S., everywhere. Mark Messier did a lot. He did a lot for hockey in New York, and even after now with his broadcasting and studio shows that he does, it's so good to have him around. I mean, I can't believe he's 64 already. I looked it up, and wow. But anyways, Messier, yeah, he was always one of my favorites. I mean, even though he wasn't from here in Michigan, but he was really a great player. I think 25 years in total, and that playing career was just fantastic. And yeah, he did a lot for Rangers hockey to try to turn that thing back around because they've had some lean years too.
What about you, Mike?
I mean, Marc Messier, one of, if not the greatest leader in hockey history. And at that time, for anybody that was around New York, and I was, the Rangers were scared of their 1954 shadow. And they couldn't, not their 1940 shadow, their 54-year drought, and they couldn't get away from it, especially in the playoffs. It was just always hanging over their head. And Messier wasn't the type of guy that was bothered by that type of stuff. He had won Stanley Cups. He was definitely the leader they needed, and he was the key person in that Stanley Cup championship in '94. However, don't overlook all of his former Oiler teammates that joined him on that Rangers team, from Kevin Lowe to Jeff Bukaboom to Craig McTavish to Asa Tikkanen. I mean, there was a load of former Edmonton Oilers that Glenn Sather sent over to Neil Smith to help them win that cup. I mean, almost half of that team that won that cup that year were former Oilers that won cups in Edmonton. So although Messier was by far and away the leader and one of the best leaders the sport's ever seen, he had a real good supporting cast of guys that he had played with, that knew what he was all about, and also knew how to win the big games.
Let me tell you one thing. I had an opportunity to interview Neil Smith on Motor City Madmouth show. You talk about a guy who did a heck of a job putting that team together. And yes, Glenn Sather had a lot to do with it. It was unbelievable. I personally think that Messier winning the one in New York was more valuable than the one that he won in the five that he won in Edmonton, because you still had Gretzky there. But to be able to be the captain of a team, and I mean the captain of a team that hadn't won since the 40s, was it like a 40-some-odd year drought, and be able to break that drought, to me, is almost the equivalence of breaking a drought with the Boston Red Sox and the Cubs. That was just a monumental drought, and Messier was the king. And to me, to be the captain of that group was just unbelievable. It really is. All right, George, as promised, we'll talk about Glenn Hall recently passed, and George can promote his book, and then we'll get him out of here.
Sure.
I want to thank George for coming on tonight, talking about the Red Wings topics, as well as a couple of these original six. Thanks for your time, George.
Appreciate
with that said, rest in peace, Glenn Hall.
Yeah, I was so sad to hear this news, Scott, about Glenn Hall. I mean, he was just a fantastic goalie. Yeah.
And he dies at the age of 94. I think he played 502 straight games. What was it, without a mask? And regular season games, 552, including playoff games, 552. I know he led the expansion St. Louis Blues, by the way, to the Cup Finals a few years. So, George, give me your thoughts about the legacy of Glenn Hall, who passed away.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible story. I mean, there's no question about he was one of the greatest goalies of all time. We all know that. And like you said, 500-plus games in a row consecutively playing for his teams. St. Louis, there's another great story, because Scotty Bowman was the coach over there, I believe in '67 or whenever they joined the league. And to have him there between the pipes was a special thing for the Blues, I know. But he's just an incredible man, an Iron Man. Finished with a record of the 407 wins. I mean, that's incredible. You talk about records that aren't going to be broken. Boy, I tell you what, of course that one, but the consecutive 502 games played, 2.50 goals against, and 84 shutouts, and oh gosh. We're going to miss him. Hockey's going to miss him, but what a fantastic man and a great career he had.
Let alone the fact he didn't wear a mask. Mike Santos, that is unheard of these days. What are your thoughts of Glenn Hall?
Yeah, no, I never, or at least I don't remember seeing Glenn Hall play, but I don't think you had to. If you were a hockey fan, you knew all about him. I mean, he had the nickname Mr. Goalie. So, I mean, that says it all, right? I mean, arguably the most important position on the ice, and you guys have already talked about his accolades. I mean, playing that many games in a row, leading, multiple teams to Stanley Cup Finals, including the expansion Blues, as George said.
Right.
And from what I understand, I never met the man, was just a prince of a guy. I don't know that there's anybody that played with him, against him, or knew him that didn't say that he wasn't just a terrific person and a gentleman.
Cody, I can't imagine you have a whole lot to say.
Well, even if I did, George and Mike took it all. So
that's all right. It's okay.
So let's just say copy paste. There we go.
There you copy and paste on the new guy. That's okay. Let's say Cody Spink's a great asset to the program. Seeing a young hockey guy out on the West Coast is great. And Cody and I and Mike will be your primary people. George will fill in when he can to help us out, and we'll continue to add more new wrinkles to the hockey show. At that point, Candy, why don't we put George's book up and let everybody know how to get a Mr. Icorn? Go ahead, George.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, guys. Letting me come on with you. Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air is my book. I write for the South Florida Tribune and the contributing writer section. And at the end of my column, there's always a tag there that will link you to Amazon, or you can just go to Amazon.com. We have a lot of hockey on that, as you can see on the cover of the book. I've got Gordie Howe with Mr. Hockey, with a swinger, the mascot of the team for a short time, and Bud Lynch. We talk about a great Canadian announcer, but he's Michigan's own, Bud Lynch, Sault Ste. Marie. And I also will let you know that you can follow me on Twitter at SanGSports99 and reach me at gicorn@yahoo.com. Got some things going on right now, personal I don't want to get into, but there's some things that is limiting my schedule, and I really appreciate Scott and Candy working with me, and you know how much I love being on this great show, and Mike and Cody, you're in great hands with you guys, so look forward to contributing once in a while, but thanks again.
That's all right, George. We love having you on. We know your hockey insight to me is second to none, and if there's ever a show on this network that we can use you on, it's this one. Baseball's in good hands, but wherever you go, you're a valuable asset for sure. With that said, Candy, why don't we go to a station break? When we come back, we have more hockey. George, thank you very much. We'll definitely be in touch. Nice job tonight, Mr. Icorn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, George.
All right, Candy, time for a station break.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Entering Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by our host, Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth. Talks about his 40-plus years in the industry and how it has evolved and changed. Old school media meets new school media. Get your copy today. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. There's also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where there is a plethora of great content, so go check it out. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to advertise or sponsor a show or be a guest on a show, email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Last, but certainly not least, if you see that red subscribe button in that lower right-hand corner, click it, like us, share us with all your friends and family, and then also turn on your notifications so you're notified anytime we go live. Back to you, Scott.
All right. Thank you, Candy. All right. According to the Athletic, a poll, the St. Louis Blues ownership has been ranked fifth best in the league to a recent poll by, obviously, the Athletic. They cite this for these particular reasons, especially since St. Louis doesn't get much national media attention. It's amazing to see all the players that have come to St. Louis and fallen in love with the city, make it their permanent home. I can tell you, a lot of players that play for the St. Louis Cardinals go there and they make it their home. Good, nice Midwestern crowd over there. It's also interesting to note that only 4 teams above the Blues are all teams that aren't affected by state income tax, making them more appealing for players to sign with. So, Cody, are you surprised that St. Louis is ranked this high?
No, just because from what I've heard is St. Louis has one of the biggest alumni and like the retirement alumni. A lot of players, they like to go there, even though they may not finish their career there, but they always go back. From what I've heard great things about St. Louis. I heard it's a beautiful city. I would love to go at least once and go check out Busch Stadium and go see a Blues game while I'm out there. But no, I'm absolutely not shocked that they're one of the top ranked ownerships just because of all the great things I've heard from multiple podcasts that I've heard about like how well they treat all their players there.
What about you? I actually went to a game over at the Kiel Center. I think it was called at the time. I know they changed the name a million times, but we ended up driving by the Checker Dome. My brother and another friend, a couple of friends, they didn't know I was talking to taxi ride into driving us out there. So take us to the Checker Dome. And my brother and friend said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, this is the Checker Dome," and they're paying money out of a taxi drive just to see that building. Oh, I mean, they just looked at me. They didn't mind it, but boy, did I catch them off guard. Say, "This is where the Blues really play. It's just this is a Blues trip. Let's go to the Checker Dome." And we were at the Kiel Center, and I think the Red Wings were taking on the Blues. I think it's a playoff, so it was a pretty cool place, Mike. And I know obviously when the St. Louis Cardinals come down here, you know, I got to know a few of those people out there. But St. Louis, I'd like to go back there to go up to the Gateway and the Arches. I'd like to do. But what are your thoughts about St. Louis in general, Mike?
Yeah, I think Cody hit it right on the head. It's a great town. It's a great sports town, and the fans are just salt of the earth people, and they support their teams. And there's nobody there that's not a fan of the Blues. There's nobody that lives in St. Louis that's a fan of another team from another place. It's a real good family area. The players and the alumni are fantastic. They're taken in by the people of St. Louis, and they don't want to leave. And their alumni has just grown stronger and stronger since the 60s when the team came along. It was really great to see them win a cup a few years back because they had never won it before. But for a while there, they actually had the longest streak of making the playoffs of anybody in the NHL, and still haven't won a cup. Yeah, I mean, there's not enough good things you can say about that town as a sports town, and it's a shame that they only have the Cardinals and the Blues as far as major sports teams, because they've had two NFL teams, really more, but two when you consider the St. Louis Cardinals and then the Rams, and to lose both of them, through no fault of their own, as far as support and fans is awful.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that is an incredible sport town. I have some friends that actually, the late Brian Burwell actually was a columnist over there that I knew really well. Another guy that lived in South Florida named Doug Vaughn, obviously started here in Miami and has been established over there as well. All right, so Mike, obviously in the last NHL draft, there were 52 Americans selected in the 2025 NHL draft. What are your thoughts about the fact that Americans are starting to become a bit more noticed in the draft?
Unfortunately, I think that's going to start going the other way. I think with the ability of Canadian junior players to now play college hockey, I think that you can see already this year that there were hundreds of them that infiltrated the U.S. college ranks. I think it's already starting to take its effect on the U.S. junior leagues like the United States Hockey League, the North American Hockey League, and the U.S. development program, because now that the top kids in the U.S. are turning down the U.S. development program because of the opportunity to go play major junior, make some money, and then go to college from there. So I hate to say it, but I think NHL players being drafted out of the United States hit its peak, at least for a while.
Okay. Cody?
See, I mean, Mike, you would know way better than I would, obviously. But I thought it'd be the opposite with the Canadian kids taking more of the college spots, but you already said that. And then also more American kids could go play major junior and then eventually maybe go over to the NCAA and everything. But I thought it would be building more just because, especially with how like we're bringing the Olympics back, NHL players are able to go. I feel like that would also bring more and more American kids to want to play hockey, especially like after Four Nations, Utah's trying to build, ice arenas everywhere, so that way more and more kids are starting to play. So I thought, maybe not as much as it is now, but I can see it going up in 3 to 5 years at least.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I still am impressed though with the U.S. development in players that are getting at least drafted. A lot of years you didn't see that, but a lot of that's attributed to the college hockey program as well, in addition to what you have at the amateur levels. Mike, you want to continue with that?
Yeah, the real problem with hockey in the United States is that it is too expensive.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why it's too expensive is because the rinks now control the youth programs as opposed to the communities and the towns and the municipalities. So Minnesota is really the last place where kids play for their town and play for their high school. And now you've got kids that are playing on these, they call them the junior teams, right? The junior Ducks, the junior Kings, the junior Bruins, the junior Flyers, and they're all over the country. And the rinks are controlling the program because they control the ice. And they're just becoming too expensive. And so there's just not as many kids that can try the sport, and not as many kids that can afford to stay in the sport for long. As I said, Minnesota is really the only place where like high school hockey is really still means anything, at least as far as the development of players goes. And in Canada, they still have that, town municipality type program where kids grow up, and because the towns finance these teams, they're not on planes every weekend. So, a kid doesn't have to live in Anaheim and get on a plane and go play in a tournament in Detroit for the weekend.
Right.
This is what's happened as hockey has expanded into the non-traditional markets in the U.S. over the last 30 years. It's great. The exposure for the game's been great. There's certainly interest from kids. And like Cody said, like Utah is now building all these rinks. The problem is they're all being controlled by the NHL team. I don't know if anybody's seen the problem they just had in Dallas, because Dallas owns all the rinks in that area, and the price is just prohibitive for kids to play, as opposed to rinks being owned by the cities, the towns, the municipalities, just like parks are, right, where kids play baseball or football and those types of things. I think it's a real problem, and it's going to take some time to reverse that problem. And it's not just a USA hockey problem. I know, like, I grew up in Massachusetts. I played high school hockey. It used to be the thing to do. Like, you grew up, you played in your town, you played against other towns. And then the goal was to play on the high school team and then go from high school to the college team. It was nothing to play in front of, 3,000 or 4,000 people while you're in high school. I mean, it was the big thing. It was what every kid wanted to do. And, that's all changed. It's not about that. As it changed and as rinks became privately owned and controlled, and the sport became more capitalistic, the school systems and the municipalities said, well, heck, if we can knock off a couple of million off our budget because we don't have to run that ice rink and pay for hockey equipment and everything else, then let's do it.
Well, you just said it right there, Mike. The bottom line is the sport is a very expensive sport, period. It's not like basketball. It's not like any other sport. It is expensive. By the time you get the skates, you get all the equipment, you get the gloves, you get the sticks, you name it. It's expensive. Just like NASCAR. Those are expensive. But the fact that they did get some guys drafted still says a little bit in terms of how far the program has come anyways. We'll see down in an episode or two, we'll talk more about the Olympics. but we're just kind of talking about scratching the surface with these as well.
Yeah.
All right.
I think
So-
the exposure is great, but the sport it's out of control. I was talking to a friend yesterday who has a son who plays, and he has to buy him a stick for $400.
Wow.
$400 for a hockey stick. When I was a kid, and I don't expect it to be this way, you know, every once in a while, the BP gas station down the street, if you filled it up your tank, you got a free hockey stick. You know, it's I mean, those types of things just aren't out there anymore. There's just, you know, we don't have wooden sticks anymore. You know, the Christian Brothers out of War Road, Minnesota, you know, they used to make sticks and they used to supply them to schools all across the country. I can remember in high school, you know, every couple of weeks, the coach would come in with a big box of sticks and you just empty them out on the floor and you just grabbed at them. And, you know, those types of opportunities just aren't there to even make it easier on kids and parents to play.
Yeah, $400 a stick is a lot. All right, let's talk about something that should hit Cody closer to home. We'll talk about the LA Kings broadcast team, okay? I'm sure he hears a few of these names. You got John Kelly over from St. Louis. Jim Fox is the lead analyst. Tony Granato, there's a name out there, Mike. Then you got Ray Ferraro's out there, Jared Stoll, Blake Bolden, Josh Schaefer, Patrick O'Neill, Carolyn Bade, Daryl Evans, Mike Kelly. What do you think of that group, Mike?
They had some long time broadcasters there that were fantastic. Nick Nixon for one, and you know they were there for a long time, and they were I'm guessing, having not lived out there, that they were just icons for Kings fans. Broadcasts have evolved obviously from when you and I were kids, George, when you had a guy doing play-by-play and another usually former player doing color, and that's it. You know, now you've got guys between the benches or girls between the benches. You've got the sideline or rinkside type reporters. You've got somebody that does the intermission guest stuff, and you've got broadcast teams of 6 or 8 people. But I can't argue with the names they have on that staff. They got some great ones. Some of them I haven't even heard yet. Like I don't know how Jared Stoll does. My guess is he's just a popular guy and he's got a popular wife that's on TV. So he's living out there.
Andrews?
Yeah, and he's a former player. So they're like, yeah, we'll give you a job, But the other guys they have there are pretty good. And some of the guys that have been there for a while, like you mentioned, Daryl Evans, they do a heck of a good job.
Yeah.
The Kelly hiring surprised me a little bit. I thought he was just about done with it. But I guess you can't keep the Kellys out of the hockey broadcast booth.
Well, go ahead, Cody. They're your broadcaster. Judge them a little bit.
Well, I could be wrong, but I think John Kelly has been out recently. I can't remember if that's true or not, but Josh Schaefer, I know, has taken over. And I've heard a lot of good things about him being the play-by-play guy. I mean, yeah, you were saying about like the Kings having Nick Nixon and they had Bob Miller before that. And it's a funny thing because I was watching the Dodgers game when they were doing that Fernando Valenzuela retirement night and everything. My father-in-law was like, I golfed with him once. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, and 2 guys from the Kings. I'm like, wait, you golfed with Fernando Valenzuela and then 2 guys from the LA Kings? He's like, yeah. He was like, yeah, it was like Bob something and Barry something. I'm like, wait. You golfed with Bob Miller and Barry Melrose? He's like, yeah, that's their names. And I was like, what the hell? Because he was just playing as a single in golf. They're like, hey, there's a foursome that need one more. And so what a lucky group to join to play golf with. And I was like, man, I wish I could just be a fly on the wall for that one and everything. But Daryl Evans, I actually met him at the rookie face-off that we had over here in Irvine. Man, for someone that used to play in the NHL, I didn't think I would tower over someone like him. But like one of the nicest guys, though. He was fantastic and everything. But like I said, I'm not much into the Kings stuff as like my dad is, so I don't really hear them as much, but I've heard nothing but great things about this from this broadcast team. I haven't heard anyone complaining about it or anything like that. So I mean, I know John Kelly, he came from St. Louis, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Jim
Yeah.
Fox has been there for a while, and I know Carolyn Baith. I believe her dad played professional,
Right.
and so I've heard good things about her. I've heard good things about her being the host and the reporter there for the Kings and everything. So because we were just at the Kings game on last Saturday, we took my dad for like a birthday/Christmas present thing. We surprised him with tickets, so that we had a lot of fun there.
Yeah, I think the names that stand out in this group here, obviously Tony Granato is one of them, Ray Ferraro, and of course Jared Stoll. We all know about Aaron Andrews being his wife, but the reality is he did win a Stanley Cup, as I understand it, with the Kings. If
I
I
think he won
understand,
with
He won
both
two.
years. Yeah, he
Yeah.
won 2 with them.
he won. Yeah, so I mean, hey, listen, more power to him. You always like to bring in guys that have won for you, and Jared Stoll definitely did it. And of course, Aaron Andrews does a pretty good job. I think I met her many years ago at the New Orleans Bowl. She's a nice lady. More power to her. So let's talk about a major fallout that occurred between two rivals that definitely don't like each other. And we're talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. Earlier this year, head coach John Cooper was fined $25K, and the Tampa Bay Lightning had been fined $100K, while Scott Sober in 4 games and J.J. Mosier have been suspended for their actions in a 7-0 loss to the Florida Panthers that included 322 minutes and 16 ejections. Let's not kid ourselves, Mike. That rivalry is definitely ugly.
And I think it's great because before they did realignment, which is about 15 years ago now, there was no rivalry between the Lightning and the Panthers. And the biggest reason there was no rivalry was because they never met in the playoffs. And now, because they've gone back to a divisional format, the games between divisional rivals mean more for placing 1 through 3 in your division. And there's a pretty good likelihood that for 2 rounds of the playoffs, you're going to have to play your divisional rivals to get out. And that's the way it was. You know, you remember, Scott, in the 70s and the 80s,
Yeah.
particularly in the 80s. You know, I grew up in Boston, and every year it was Boston and Montreal, or it was Boston and Buffalo, or, you know, even Hartford or Quebec. Like, they were wars. And in the old Norris division with the Maple Leafs and the Red Wings and the North Stars and the Blues, it was a war. And, you know, I can remember with Calgary and Winnipeg and LA and Edmonton, like, you had to fight your way out. And so this has evolved over the years now, because these teams now, both of them being competitive over the last decade plus, meet each other in the playoffs almost every year. And the stakes are high, and that carries over to the regular season. And that means, regardless of how many penalty minutes and how crazy the games are getting, that means people now want to go watch the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers play in October and November and December, where before they didn't care. And so it's really helped hockey in Florida. I would argue, and Cody knows better than I do, that it's probably very similar with the Ducks and the Kings, because when you're that close and you have a, you know, and you have a chance to make the playoffs, and you're battling with that team for a playoff spot all year, and then all of a sudden there they are, their faces are right in front of you again in the first or second round of the playoffs. You either you start to not like that guy that you're lining up next to, 12 or 15 times a year. And if you remember, going back to the preseason this year, Florida and Tampa had a hell of a crazy penalty-filled game in Orlando in the preseason too.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Well, I'm telling you, I saw these two teams play each other, during the COVID year when I was out there a lot more. The hostility between these two teams is like no other. I-75 separates these two from going at each other. I mean, it's just been a dogfight, a war, whatever you want. And I'm going to tell you something funny about, you talked about the Norris division. Yeah. Chris Berman would talk about the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings. Yeah. He called that the Norris division in football. That was just unbelievable.
Yeah. But what's the difference, right? What's the difference between Florida and Tampa and Edmonton and Calgary, right? LA and the Ducks, like isn't this what you want? I don't necessarily want to see penalty-filled 300-minute brawls. But I'll tell you what, the fans don't mind it, and they'll start showing up for those games against their rival, during the season, where before they weren't showing up, at least in Florida.
Well, bottom line is these two teams hate each other. That's all there is. They go to the goaltenders, the coaches. No matter whether you got Quinville in there, it doesn't matter whether you got what you have. You got Quinville in there, Paul
Maurice.
Paul Maurice, right? It doesn't matter who your coaches are. They still, and John
Sports-
Cooper's been there forever.
Sports is made on rivalries, right? The Red Sox and the Yankees, right? The Packers and the Bears. I mean, this is what sports is. That's what makes sports so great. USC and Notre Dame, or USC and UCLA. Like that's what sports is all about. The rivalries.
All right, Cody, what's your take on this mess here called the Florida rivalry?
So while Mike was talking, I counted how many penalties were in each period. So there was 22 in the first, 28 in the second, 15 in the third, and 18 different game misconducts.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I think one of the and there was an ineligible player because I think one of the European guys, he got ejected and he forgot he got ejected. He didn't know, so he went on the ice, and I think they scored, and he got the assist, and they had to call the goal back because he was ineligible in that game. So I thought that was pretty funny, but yeah, like the Ducks and Kings, it hasn't been as popular as lately, just because the Ducks have been, one of the worst teams in the league, and the Kings have been a playoff team the last 4 or 5 years. But it's definitely getting worse now. The Ducks are getting a little bit better, but not. I mean, I would say right now the Ducks are better. But I just remember watching a game, and there was it was like the Four Nations. There we had a Ducks versus Kings fight. They dropped the puck. Another two guys fought, and then once they finished, put the guys in the penalty box, dropped the puck. Immediately another fight. So we had 3 fights and within like 5 seconds of game clock, if that. And like I said, I know that's what the fans love. That's why it's so expensive to kind of go to these games too. You go to a regular game and they're like, oh, it's like $50 a ticket. You want that same ticket for a Ducks Kings game? It's $150 a ticket. That's what people want to see, is these rivalry games. And now that Florida is one of the best teams in hockey, and and Tampa's there too, that just made the rivalry, I think, so much better. And Florida just has that I don't give a crap attitude, and I think that really pisses off the Tampa Bay guys and everything like that, because Tampa Bay was the big brother, and now Florida's like, nope, I'm the big brother now, and I can see why they don't like each other. I can see, especially when you got Marchand and Kachuk leading the way for Florida.
Well, the amazing part about it, when you put these two teams in perspective, is how many Stanley Cups have they won between them in the last 5 years? And how many times they've been in the Cup Finals? That says a lot. The fact that they're good and they hate each other adds a little more intrigue to it.
I want to say Florida's team has been in the playoffs since 2020?
Yeah, they've done pretty well this last 5 to 10 years for sure. It's funny how you talk about the Four Nations, because you just segued into our last topic. Then Candy's going to come on for a non-sport topic and preview Fire Up. But let's talk about Mike Sullivan talked about John Tortorella's role in the Four Nations face-off. Tortorella says that I don't want you to be the hammer. I'll be the hammer. I want you to be the wise old man. You imagine that? Tortorella's wise old man. What vibes to that? I mean, I got to tell you one thing. I mean, Tortorella doesn't look bad with his gray hair, and I personally would love to meet Tortorella. I've never met the guy. I know just because I had a bad experience with Dave Doran of NC State, that doesn't matter. He's an idiot, and a lot of things I won't want to say on a family show, which I know I'm going to say to his face come ACC Media Day, but I wouldn't mind meeting Torch. You know what, Torch? I like everything about you. I'll talk to you. I love it when you sit your guys down if they won't let them play for the national anthem. You're all right with me. I'll just hit him with a couple of bombs, and once I get him to like me, it'll be a good experience, unlike that Siktamola head that resides in Raleigh. So what are your thoughts about the words of wisdom, Mike, about what Sullivan had to say about Tortorella.
Well, they obviously know each other. They're both Massachusetts guys. I think I mentioned on this show before. I played in the same youth hockey program as Torts, and I'm very close to his brother Jim Tortorella. He's a real intense guy, but I mean, away from the game and the ice, he's a really good guy. I don't know if many people know this, but he had a real beef with the New York Rangers beat writer Larry Brooks a few years back.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, it was vicious. And, Larry Brooks, unfortunately, was stricken and lost his battle this past year with cancer. When Larry Brooks when it was first announced he had cancer, the first phone call he got was from John Tortorella.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that he'll go to war with anybody. He'll get in people's faces, but I think down deep he's a good human being, and he also can leave it, on the ice or leave it at the rink and separate those types of things. So maybe that's where Sullivan's coming from with this guy saying, like, you're not your days of being the heavy are over, right? You don't need to do that anymore. Now you've got so much more to give in a different way because you've been in so many of these positions, and not only can players benefit from that, but Sullivan can benefit from that as well.
Wasn't Tortorella the head coach? Wasn't Mike Sullivan the assistant coach with the Rangers when Tortorella was the head coach?
He very well could have been, yeah.
I believe that's what they're talking about when Sullivan got hired as the Rangers coach. So obviously they worked together before, and I think it's just crazy that Tortorella's. I can't see him as not being the hammer kind of guy, but if Sullivan would ask me that, I'm like, can I be both? Can I be the old wise man and the hammer at the same time? I mean, because who else wouldn't you want to hear from like Tortorella like that? I mean, someone he's wise beyond his years. He's been one of the best coaches, I want to say, in the 2010s. Led Columbus to some good playoffs series, I believe, with Vancouver too, and he won with Tampa Bay. So I'm gonna say great coach, someone who I'd love to, like I said, like you said, Scott, I would love to meet John Tortorella one day.
Let me tell you, Mike, I've met a lot of characters as far as coaches and managers through the years. I wouldn't mind meeting this guy. I know what he's about. I've seen all of his tape on the air. So anytime you see a guy's tape on the air, he's rough. He's obviously rough around the edges, but deep down inside, he has a good passion for the game of hockey. I think he probably has a big heart. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a bit misunderstood too, because he's just an old school guy. People like us that are old school tend to be a little bit more old school. Misunderstood for sure, but you're all right, my book. Hey, Torch, if he's going to call you a wise old man, Torch, you're okay in my book. You really are. So, all right, with that said, we're going to bring Candy Ebling on, non-sports topic. She's going to go ahead and preview Fire Up. There you go. That non-sports topic. We'll throw them in once in a while. Is this Iceland Air is to connect Miami and Reykjavik with first ever flights. What are your thoughts, Candy, about that? Oh, I wouldn't mind going ahead and flying up there one day just to make Iceland an exclusive. Although, we still have more other things to do.
We went on our first cruise last year, and it included Iceland, and it was one of the creme de la creme. That was probably the reason why we chose that cruise, was to go to Iceland. It's a very, very pretty place, and kudos for them to having one flight that goes there back and forth to Miami. Probably should have done it sooner.
Yeah. Well, hey, Mike, you live in my neck of the woods. Now this is local information for you.
Yeah, I'd love to go to Iceland someday.
Yeah, it's a cool place. It really is. What about you, Code?
I mean, I would love to go, but I don't know. Iceland just has a bad taste in my mouth just because of the Mighty Ducks movie, because it was bad guys. But I just remember in the movie, there's that famous quote from the Iceland girl chick that was the coach or trainer that Iceland is nice and Iceland is nice and Greenland is ice. Because they Bombay, Mila Estevez, his character thought that Iceland was made out of ice, and it's not really. And she was saying no, it's a lot better than Greenland is. So I've always kind of wanted to go to Iceland at the same time with that too.
Well, I know one thing. My brother said that's one place I got to before my younger brother. Now he's on the hook to go to in 2027. I got there before him.
I just don't know if I want to go from California to Miami to go to Iceland. I'm too tall for airlines like that. I can only do so much.
I don't know. It's a thought. I know Candy and I. At least we know there's a direct flight in our neck of the woods to go, and Mike isn't too far from us, right up the road, 25 minutes, right? So, hey, maybe one of these days, you and I, Mike, you got a girlfriend. Maybe the four of us ought to go to Iceland one day. How do you like that?
No, I'm not going in the winter, though.
Huh?
I'm not going in the winter.
You're not what?
Not going in the winter.
Going in the winter.
Okay.
Only in the summer.
Oh, I didn't say winter. I said summer.
Okay.
I ain't going there in the winter. No way. It was cold enough during. Let me tell you, it was cold enough during the summer. You think I go out there? I don't think our blood's too thinned out to go up there during the winter. What isn't it? Come on, we're Floridians.
I'm a big dude. I might be able to last pretty well in that Iceland winter.
I've never met you in person. How tall are you, man?
6'3".
Oh, okay, you're bigger than I am. It's okay.
I'm a big dude. I run hot.
That's okay. You're all right. Well, and by the way, just so you know, Scott Morganroth, Mike Santos, Cody Smink here on the Sports Wrap. We'll be doing this, three of us. If we bring on guests, great. Not get the three of us, no big deal. Icorn once in a while, and whoever else we do. We bring in the hockey show Thursday night here at 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Candy, give us a preview of what you have in store for Fire Up.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot of football because there's been a lot of changes. Currently, if you don't want to know the score, you can, plug your ears for a minute, but it's 17-13 at halftime right now of the Hurricanes Ole Miss game. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. We'll preview and talk about tomorrow night's game because this weekend is a lot of football, a lot of playoff football, I should say. College, and then as well as NFL. And then we're going to be talking about some of these coaching changes that have taken place and where we think some of these coaches are going to land. So that's what we're going to be primarily talking about. You never know, we might throw in a little bit because we always have a segment on our show called My Town. So it's whatever's happening in your town.
There you go. You have it. That follows us here on Sports Wrap. Meanwhile, Mike, Cody, and I, we're it. We no problem. All of us do what we're going to do, and we'll see who comes along. But I'm enjoying working with the three of us, Mike. You got a guy from the West Coast who we have to teach this guy a few things, don't we? And I'm working on a few other people.
We just got to get some topics that aren't from the last century. That's all.
Yeah, that's all. Oh, don't worry. I'm working on a few of those.
We're showing our age, Scott.
Yeah, I know. I'm working on it, Mikey. Yeah, I know.
You're digging yourself a bigger hole with those ones, man.
That's okay. We're getting through a lot of the old traditional ones. We'll work our way through. But Cody, no matter what happens, you're going to learn about the sport of hockey with Mike and I anyway.
And I love every second of it.
Hey, you got more experience in here. This guy's a king anyways to begin with when it comes to hockey, to begin with this guy. And me, I've been around it my whole life too, growing up in Hockey Town. And you get the West Coast version too. Guys like you obviously know about the Marcel Dion's. You know Marcel Dion. You've heard of him, right?
I've heard of him, yes. I know.
Yeah, okay. So
I know a friend that's friends with him. So I know someone that knows him pretty well because he does the memorabilia stuff. So he knows Marcel Dion, and I'm trying to get him on the show at one point if I can.
Yeah, wouldn't it be something like that? We have to take into your connection, see some of your people we get on as well with the three of us. And I'm working on a few others as well. Yeah, see, at least he knows Marcel Dion. He doesn't show his age there. Then again, he's from the West Coast. What do you expect? With Marcel Dion being a legend with the LA Kings for sure. So meanwhile, that does it here for Sports Wrap. So on behalf of Mike Santos, George Icorn earlier, Cody Spank, myself, and Candy Ebling joining us as well. We want to thank you very much for joining us on Sports Wrap, and we'll see you next Thursday with a lot more hay, and we'll have a lot more to say. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Fire Up is next.